The paper grocery bag was disintegrating in my arms. Rain hammered against my back, soaking through my thin waitress uniform, chilling me to the bone. I shivered, shifting the weight of the bag. Inside were 5 packs of spicy beef noodles, Julian's favorite. I had used my tips from the lunch rush to buy them. I reached for the door handle of the apartment, the one I paid the rent for every single month. It was locked. I knocked, balancing the wet bag on my hip. "Julian, it's me." I forgot my keys again. The lock clicked. The door swung open, but only halfway. Julian stood there. He wasn't wearing his sweatpants. He was wearing the navy blue suit I had spent 20 minutes ironing this morning before my shift started. His hair was gelled back, and he smelled like expensive cologne, the bottle I bought him for our anniversary. "You're home," I said, a smile trembling on my lips. "I got the noodles. We can celebrate your coding sprint finishing." He didn't move out of the doorway. He didn't smile back. "We aren't celebrating, Elena," he said. His voice was ice. "What? Why? Did the pitch go bad?" I asked, stepping forward. He put a hand on the doorframe, blocking me. "No, the pitch went perfectly." "Better than perfectly." "Then let me in." "It's freezing out here." "You can't come in, Elena." My brow furrowed. The rain was dripping off my nose. "Julian, stop joking. I paid the rent yesterday." "Let me in." "That's the thing," he said, looking at me like I was a stranger who had asked for spare change. "You paid the rent for a struggling coder. That person doesn't exist anymore." "What are you talking about?" "I secured the investment," he said flatly. "Thorn Industries. The full package. $5 million in seed funding." My heart leaped, momentarily forgetting the cold. "Oh my God, Julian, that's amazing." "We did it. All those nights I worked double shifts, all the sober fees I paid, it was worth it." He laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dry and cruel. "We?" "There is no we in Thorn Industries, Elena." I froze. "What?" "Mr. Thorn is a traditional man," Julian said, checking his watch. "He invests in family. He invests in stability. Part of the deal is a merger. Not just of companies, but of families." I stared at him, the grocery bag slipping slightly. "A merger?" "I'm marrying Chloe Thorn," he said. The world seemed to stop spinning. "Chloe? The heiress? The girl you called a spoiled brat last week?" "She's not a brat. She's my fiancée. And she's the key to my future. I'm your future." I screamed, the desperation clawing at my throat. 5 years, Julian. I slept on the floor so you could have the bed. I ate leftovers so you could have fresh meat. You said I was your partner. "You were a phase," he corrected me, his eyes dead. "You were the struggling phase. You were the I need someone to pay the electric bill phase. But look at you, Elena." He gestured vaguely at my soaking wet uniform, my messy hair, the dissolving bag of cheap noodles. "You don't fit in the penthouse," he said. "You're dead weight." "Dead weight?" I choked out. "I carried you. And now I'm flying. So I don't need you holding me down." "Julian, please," I begged, hate and love warring in my chest. "Don't do this, not for money. It's not just money. It's power. Something you'll never understand." He started to close the door. "My stuff is in there," I shouted, stepping forward. "I'll have my assistant box it up and send it to the shelter," he said. "The shelter? I have nowhere to go." "Not my problem anymore, Julian." "Goodbye, Elena. Thanks for the noodles." He didn't even look back. He slammed the door shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty hallway. I stood there, staring at the wood grain, the rain mixing with the hot tears streaming down my face. The bottom of the grocery bag finally gave out. The packages of instant noodles fell onto the muddy pavement, splashing into a puddle. I looked down at them, cheap, salty, and worthless. Just like he made me feel. I fell to my knees, gasping for air, realizing that while I was building a life for us, he was building a life without me. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had stolen my youth and slammed the door in my face. My phone screen was cracked from dropping it, but I could still see Sarah's name. My fingers were so numb I could barely press the call button. "Sarah?" I choked out. He threw me out. "What? Who? Julian?" Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through the static of the line. "He's marrying someone else. I'm on the street. I don't have any money for a cab. Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, Sarah's beat-up Honda pulled up to the curb. I climbed in, shaking uncontrollably, water dripping from my hair onto her upholstery. She didn't ask questions immediately. She just turned up the heat and drove me to her studio apartment. It was the size of a closet, but it was warm. "Here," she said, tossing a spare duvet onto the hardwood floor. "It's not much, but it's better than the sidewalk." I curled up in a ball, staring at the dust bunnies under her desk. "I gave him everything, Sarah. My paycheck, my savings. I paid for his server space yesterday. I have $12 to my name." Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, looking furious. "We can sue him." "You paid rent on that place. It's in his name," I whispered, the shame burning my throat. I was just the girlfriend paying the bills. I was so stupid. "You weren't stupid, Elena. You were in love." "He's the monster." "I feel worthless," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me like I was dirt. Like I was nothing. "Sleep," she commanded softly. "We figure it out tomorrow." I didn't sleep. I lay on the hard floor, listening to the city breathe, feeling the phantom slam of the door in my face over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian's cold sneer. The next morning, Sarah had to leave early for her shift. I couldn't stand the silence of the room, so I walked outside and sat on the concrete steps of the building. I pulled my knees to my chest, letting the tears fall again. "You're blocking the walkway, kid." I looked up, startled. It was Mr. Henderson, my old landlord from the cheap apartment Julian and I lived in before the upgrade. I hadn't realized Sarah lived in one of his other buildings. He was holding a ring of keys and a steaming paper cup. "Mr. Henderson," I wiped my face quickly, trying to hide the puffiness. "I'm sorry." I'm just staying with Sarah," he grunted, looking down at me. "I heard about the big shot moving uptown. Didn't know he left you behind." "He kicked me out," I said, my voice trembling. "He said I was a phase." Mr. Henderson sighed, a raspy sound like gravel. He extended the paper cup toward me. "Black coffee, 2 sugars." "Drink it." I took it, the warmth seeping into my frozen hands. "Thank you." "Crying isn't going to get your dignity back," he said gruffly. "And it's not going to make that boy grow a conscience. I don't know what to do. He has the money. He has the power. I have nothing." He sat down on the step next to me, groaning as his knees cracked. "You have hunger. He's full." "That makes you dangerous, Elena." I looked at him, confused. "Dangerous?" "The best revenge isn't screaming on the pavement," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "It's succeeding. It's making him look up one day and realize he's the one standing in the rain. Don't get mad, Elena. Get even by being better." He patted my shoulder, stood up, and walked inside the building. I stared at the black coffee. The steam rose up, twisting in the cold morning air. I stopped crying. The tears felt like a waste of water. Success, I thought. I stood up. I drank the coffee in one gulp, the bitter taste waking me up. I locked the pain in a box deep inside my chest and threw away the key. I wasn't going to cry for Julian Thorne ever again. I was going to bury him. "Phone call on line 2, I said, my voice perfectly level. "Mr. Stevens says it's urgent." The junior associate rolled his eyes, snatching the phone without a thank you. To them, I was office furniture. I was the girl who watered the plants and remembered how they took their coffee. They didn't know I memorized every document that crossed my desk. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. The office was a graveyard of silent monitors and empty chairs. I sat at the reception desk, the only light coming from my small reading lamp. I was tracing a line in a textbook with my finger, whispering the terms to myself. "You're still here." I jumped, slamming the heavy book shut. Marcus stood in the shadows of the hallway. He was the firm's most feared partner, a man who spoke in single syllables and ended careers with a simple nod. He was terrifying. "Mr. Sterling," I stammered, standing up quickly and smoothing my skirt. I was just waiting for the rain to let up. He walked closer, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He tapped the cover of the book I was trying to hide. "Mergers and Hostile Acquisitions." Heavy reading for a receptionist. "I find it interesting," I said, keeping my chin up. I wasn't going to apologize for learning. Do you? He leaned against the front of the desk, crossing his arms over his chest. "Tell me then, why is the merger with K-Tech failing?" "Everyone in this building is talking about it." I hesitated. This was a test or a trap. "Because the valuation is wrong," I said, one eyebrow raised. "Explain." Everyone is looking at their current revenue, I said, my voice gaining strength. But their value isn't in what they sell. It's in the patent they filed 3 years ago. The one for battery efficiency. If you strip the retail division, the patent alone covers the acquisition debt. The silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. Marcus stared at me, his dark eyes unreadable. The deal is dead, he said finally. The lawyers gave up this morning. The lawyers are looking at the law, I countered, feeling a reckless bravery. I'm looking at the asset. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his silver flash drive. He tossed it onto the glass desk. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. That drive contains the raw data, he said. The partners meet on Friday morning. That gives you 72 hours. To do what? I asked, staring at the drive. To prove you're not just a receptionist. Fix the deal. If you fail, you're fired for unauthorized access to confidential files. And if I succeed? Then I pay for your education. And you never answer your phone again. He turned and began walking away. Mr. Sterling? I called out. He stopped but didn't turn around. Clock is ticking, Elena. I didn't go home, I didn't sleep. For 3 days I lived in that lobby. I drank so much espresso my hands shook. I spread papers across the marble floor, highlighting clauses, calculating risks, looking for the golden thread that would tie it all together. Every time I wanted to close my eyes, I pictured Julian laughing at me. I pictured the door slamming. That anger was better than caffeine. Friday, 7:55 a.m., Marcus walked in. He looked fresh, rested, and sharp. I looked like a wreck with dark circles under my eyes and ink stains on my fingers. Well? He asked, stopping at my desk. I handed him a single red folder. I restructured the offer. We spin off the retail arm to pay the initial buy-in. K-Tech keeps their board seats, but we get the patent. He opened the folder, he read the first page, then the second. He didn't smile, he didn't look impressed. He just closed it and looked at me. Go home and shower, he said. Did I fix it? I asked, my voice raspy. You saved it, he said, walking toward the elevator. Report to my office on Monday. You're a junior analyst now. I slumped against the desk, exhaustion hitting me like a physical wave. But for the first time in 6 months, I wasn't the disposable girl, I was a player. And I was just getting started. I adjusted the cuffs of my silk blouse, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. 2 years ago, I was wearing a stained apron. Today, I was wearing a suit that cost more than my old car. I looked sharp, professional, and nothing like the girl who cried in the rain. I walked into the kitchen. Sarah was leaning against the counter, hiding something behind her back. You're going to be late, Sarah said, her voice tight. Marcus hates it when you're late. I have 10 minutes, I replied, reaching for my espresso. What are you hiding? Nothing. Just the mail. Sarah, I held out my hand. Give it to me. She sighed, a heavy, defeated sound, and pulled a glossy magazine from behind her back. She slapped it onto the marble countertop face down. I didn't want you to see it before your meeting. It's everywhere today. I flipped it over. The cover was blindingly bright. Julian stood there, looking like a king in a white tuxedo. His arm was wrapped possessively around Chloe. She was draped in lace and diamonds, smiling that effortless, arrogant smile that only comes from never hearing the word no. The headline screamed in gold letters. Julian Thorne and heiress Chloe to wed in lavish ceremony, the merger of the century. I stared at the photo. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing weight in my chest. But it didn't come. Say something, Sarah whispered, watching me closely. Scream, throw the coffee cup. It's okay. I took a calm sip of my espresso. He's gained weight. Sarah blinked. What? Look at his face, I said, tapping a manicured fingernail against the glossy page. He looks soft, comfortable. Elena, he's getting married. To her, after everything he did to you. I know, I said coolly. Thorne Industries posted record profits last quarter. Everyone thinks they're untouchable. Because they are, Sarah said bitterly. They won, Elena. Did they? I flipped the page to the interview inside. Listen to this, Julian says, we believe in tradition. Our technology is the standard because it works. Do you know what that means in this industry, Sarah? That they are reliable. No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. It means they are stagnant. He's still using the same code base he wrote 3 years ago. He's stopped innovating because he thinks the money makes him safe. I looked up at Sarah. He's arrogant. And arrogance is a blind spot. You're scaring me, Sarah said, taking a step back. You don't look sad. You look dangerous. I'm not sad, I'm an analyst, I said. And I just found a flaw in the market leader. I ripped the page out of the magazine. The sound was sharp and satisfying. So, you're not going to go there and make a scene? She asked hopefully. You aren't going to crash the wedding? Crash the wedding? I laughed, shaking my head. That's what the old Elena would have done. That's emotional. That's messy. I folded the picture of Julian's smiling, comfortable face and slipped it into my blazer pocket. I'm not going to crash his party, I told her, picking up my briefcase. I'm going to crash his legacy. He built a castle on sand, Sarah. I'm just going to bring the tide. What are you going to do? Research, I said, opening the door. I'm going to find his competitors. I'm going to find the crack in his armor. And then I'm going to break him. The basement smelled like stale coffee and ozone. I stepped over a tangle of black cables, my heels clicking sharply on the cold concrete floor. It was a far cry from the marble lobby of the investment firm, but this was where the war would be won. You're late, a voice muttered from behind a wall of glowing monitors. The entrance was behind a dumpster, Kenji, I replied, placing my briefcase on a wobbly table. I had to be careful not to ruin my shoes. A head popped up. He had messy hair that hadn't seen a comb in days and thick glasses sliding down his nose. He looked terrified. You're the investor? I'm the opportunity, I corrected him. Show me the engine. Kenji hesitated, his fingers hovering over a greasy keyboard. It's not finished. The interface is ugly. It doesn't have the sleek look that the big companies have. I don't care about pretty, I said, leaning over his shoulder. I care about fast. Run the simulation. He hit the enter key. On the screen, a complex 3D model rendered instantly. There was no loading bar, no lag, it just appeared. My breath caught in my throat. Do it again. He refreshed the page. Instant. How? I whispered. Thorne's Titan system takes 3 minutes to process a file this size. Kenzie snorted, relaxing a little. Titan is bloated code. It's built on architecture from 5 years ago. It's like trying to run a racehorse with a backpack full of rocks. It's faster, I said, my mind racing. And cheaper to run? About 40% cheaper. Less server load. I looked at him. Why hasn't anyone bought this? Kenji's face fell. He slumped back in his chair, spinning a pen nervously. I tried to sell it 2 years ago. I got a meeting with the biggest player in town. My stomach tightened. Who? Julian Thorne, he said quietly. I was an intern. I showed him the prototype. I told him his current system was inefficient. And? He laughed at me, Kenji said, staring at the floor. He didn't even look at the code. He looked at my cheap suit and my stutter. He called the project amateur trash and told security to escort me out. He said he didn't need advice from a nobody. The anger flared in my chest, hot and familiar. I knew that laugh. I knew exactly how it felt to be dismissed by Julian Thorne. He was wrong, I said firmly. Kenji looked up. What? I opened my briefcase and pulled out a check. It was everything I had, my entire savings, plus a substantial check Marcus had signed over to me that morning. Julian Thorne is an idiot, I said, sliding the check across the desk. He looks at the surface. I look at the value. Kenji looked up. What? I'm buying 51%, I told him. You keep the tech side, you make it faster. You make it perfect. I handle the business. I handle the war. War? He asked, adjusting his glasses. We're going to bury him, Kenji. We're going to take his clients, his reputation, and his market share. But we need a name. He looked at the screen, then at me. I don't know. I'm just a coder. Phoenix Tech, I said, the name tasting like iron on my tongue. Because we're rising from the ashes of everything he burned. Kenji grinned, a slow, dangerous smile. Phoenix Tech, I like it. Get to work, I said, turning to leave. I walked back up the stairs, leaving the basement behind. I was exhausted. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. But as I stepped out into the night air, I didn't feel tired. Every time I blinked, I saw Julian's face. I wasn't just building a company down there in the dark. I was building a guillotine. And the blade was sharp. The graph on my tablet screen was a beautiful crimson slope. It showed the client retention rate for Thorne Industries diving straight down. 15%, I whispered to the empty air of my office. We took 15% of his market share in 90 days. Kenji's code wasn't just good. It was a predator. I swiped the screen off and stood up. I wasn't celebrating with champagne in the office. I was going to the Lion's Den. The annual tech gala was a masquerade this year. Perfect. I slipped on a mask made of black lace and diamonds, checking the fit in the mirror. It covered enough of my face to hide the girl Julian used to know, leaving only the woman who was destroying him visible. The ballroom was suffocatingly warm, smelling of expensive lily and old money. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and moved toward the periphery. I wasn't there to dance. I was there to watch the cracks form. I found them near the ice sculpture. Julian looked terrible. His tuxedo was impeccable, but his face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. He was gripping a glass of whiskey like a lifeline. His father, Mr. Thorne, stood stiffly beside him, looking like a storm cloud. I drifted closer, hidden by a large pillar and the noise of the orchestra. 3 major accounts, Julian, Mr. Thorne hissed, his voice low but cutting. Gone in a single month. The logistics firm, the banking group, even the hospital network. It's a market fluctuation, father, Julian snapped, downing half his drink. This new startup Phoenix or whatever, they're burning venture capital to undercut our prices. It's unsustainable. They'll be bankrupt by Christmas. It's not undercutting if their product works better, Mr. Thorne said, his tone icy. I had the CTO run a benchmark. Phoenix is processing data at double our speed. Why aren't we faster? Because our infrastructure is complex, Julian argued, sweat beading on his forehead. We have legacy systems to maintain. We can't just pivot overnight. Excuses, Mr. Thorne spat. You got lazy. You spent too much time planning the wedding and appearing in magazines, and not enough time leading. Chloe is a distraction. Don't bring her into this, Julian muttered, looking around nervously. I'll fix it. You better, the old man warned. Or I will find someone who can. Mr. Thorne walked away in disgust. Julian stood alone, looking small. He signaled a waiter for another drink. The golden boy was tarnishing Dot. I decided to get closer. Just to feel the heat. I walked past him, my pace slow and deliberate. The hem of my midnight blue dress brushed against his leg. He stiffened. He turned his head sharply. Excuse me? I didn't stop. I kept my back to him, moving with the flow of the crowd. Wait, he called out, his voice slurring slightly. He took a step toward me. That perfume, vanilla and sandalwood? It was the same scent I wore 5 years ago. Cheap then, custom made now. Miss? He reached out, his hand grasping at empty air. I slipped behind a group of laughing investors, my heart pounding a steady, calm rhythm. I didn't turn around. Julian? I heard a high-pitched voice calling him from the other side. Stop harassing the guests and get me a drink. He hesitated, rubbing his temples. I watched from the shadows. I thought, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. No, she's probably flipping burgers somewhere. Couldn't be. He turned back to his fiancée, defeated. I touched the cold glass of my water to my lips. He had sensed me. Good. The ghost of his past wasn't just haunting him, she was hunting him. And I had drawn first blood. I tapped my fingernails against the ceramic mug, watching the rain streak the window of the small cafe. It was 3 blocks from Thor Industries, close enough to be convenient, far enough to be discreet. Elena? I looked up. Linda stood there, clutching a wet umbrella. She looked exhausted. Her blazer was wrinkled, and the dark circles under her eyes told a story of sleepless nights. Hello, Linda, I said, gesturing to the seat opposite me. Thank you for meeting me. She sat down heavily, staring at me. Her eyes widened as they took in my tailored suit, the designer watch on my wrist, and the calm way I held myself. My God, she breathed. You look different. 2 years is a long time, I said softly. I ordered your favorite. Earl Grey, extra lemon. She cracked a sad smile. You remembered. You always remembered the little things. Even when you were broke and bringing Julian his forgotten lunch, you'd bring me a cookie. You were kind to me when he wasn't, I replied. How are things at the tower? Linda's expression hardened instantly. She took a sip of tea, her hand shaking slightly. It's a nightmare. Chloe, she's impossible. I saw the wedding photos, I probed gently. She looks very happy. She throws things, Linda whispered, leaning in. Yesterday, she threw a stapler at me because I booked her spa appointment for 2 o'clock instead of 2:30. She called me incompetent trash in front of the entire executive floor. And Julian? He just stood there, she said bitterly. He wrote her a check for a new handbag to calm her down. He didn't even look at me. I reached across the table and rested my hand on hers. You don't deserve that, Linda. I know, she said. Her voice dropped to a hush. I know who you are now, Elena. I know you're running Phoenix Tech. Everyone is whispering about it. Then you know I'm not just here for tea. You want to know why the cash flow is drying up, she stated flatly. I know he's losing clients to me, I said. But the losses on the public reports don't match the panic I see in his eyes. There's a gap. Linda looked around the shop to ensure no one was listening. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the table. He's not just losing money, she said. He's spending money he doesn't have. I opened the flap. My eyes scanned the rows of numbers. Private jet charters to Milan, Linda listed off as I read. A villa renovation in the south of France. A diamond necklace invoiced as consulting fees. He's draining the R&D budget to pay for Chloe's lifestyle. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. This is embezzlement. He's using shareholder funds for personal expenses. He thinks he can put it back once the stock goes up again, Linda explained. But the stock isn't going up. Because of you. He's digging a grave, I murmured, closing the envelope. And he just handed me the shovel. I reached for my checkbook. Linda, let me compensate you for. She grabbed my wrist, stopping me. No, you're risking your job. I don't want your money, Elena, she said, her eyes burning with a quiet fury. I want you to take him down. I want to see the look on Chloe's face when the credit cards stop working. You have my word, I said, tucking the envelope into my bag. Be careful, she warned, standing up. He's desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. So am I replied. She walked out into the rain. I sat there for a moment, patting the leather of my bag. Inside was the end of Julian Thorne. He had traded my loyalty for Chloe's vanity, and now the bill was finally due. I had him. This is the smoking gun, Marcus said, placing the documents on his mahogany desk. Linda came through. We can leak this to the press tomorrow. The sack will arrest him by noon. Too easy, I replied, leaning back in the leather chair. If he goes to jail, he becomes a victim. He blames the system. I want him to know it was me. I want to take the one thing he chose over me. Marcus smiled, a rare, terrifying sight. The company, exactly. The stock is at an all-time low because of Phoenix Tech's pressure. If we buy now, we get it for pennies on the dollar. Marcus pressed the intercom button. Send in Mr. Graves. A moment later, the heavy door opened. Mr. Graves, our lead counsel, walked in. He looked like a shark in a three-piece suit, his eyes scanning the room for blood. Mr. Graves, I said, standing up. We are initiating a hostile takeover. Aggressive, Graves noted, opening his laptop immediately. Thorne holds 40%. You need 51 to control the board. It will be expensive. I know the math, I said. Start buying. Every available share. Use the shell company. The purchaser name? Graves asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. E. Vance, I said. Let him think it's some faceless venture capitalist. He won't suspect a thing until it's too late. The next 3 weeks were a blur of caffeine and adrenaline. I lived in the war room we set up in Marcus's office. My phone became an extension of my hand. Mrs. Gable, I said into the receiver, pacing the floor at 3 a.m. I understand your loyalty to the Thorne family, but look at the dividends. They haven't paid out in 2 quarters. Vance is offering 20% above market value. I paused, listening to her hesitation. You're selling? I asked. Wise choice, Mrs. Gable. I hung up and marked another name off the whiteboard with a red marker. Marcus walked in with takeout boxes. You look terrible. I look winning, I corrected him, rubbing my aching temples. That was the 3rd board number. We are at 48%. Julian is panicking, Marcus said, sitting on the edge of my desk. He's trying to rally investors, but he has nothing to show them. He's calling Vance a corporate raider in the papers. He's not wrong, I muttered, grabbing a spring roll. One more, Reginald Pierce. He holds the swinging 3%. If he sells, it's over. Get him on the line, Marcus said. I dialed. Mr. Pierce, I said, my voice smooth despite the exhaustion. This is Vance's representative. We know about your gambling debts in Macau. Silence on the line. We aren't judging, I continued coldly. We are offering a solution. Sell the shares, pay the debt. Keep your reputation. Send the contract, a shaky voice replied. I hung up. The room was silent. The sun was just cresting over the city skyline, painting the office in orange and purple light. Mr. Graves walked in, holding a single sheet of paper. The transaction just cleared, he announced. You own 51% of Thor Industries. I stood up, walking to the window. I looked at the tower across the city where Julian was probably sleeping. It's done? I asked quietly. It's done, Marcus confirmed, standing beside me. You own the house, the furniture, and the man inside. I didn't feel joy. I felt a cold, heavy resolution. The girl who begged on the doorstep was gone. Get the car, I told them, buttoning my blazer and grabbing the file. I have a board meeting to attend. You can't go in there. They are in a closed session. The receptionist's voice was high-pitched and frantic. She scrambled out from behind her desk, her heels clacking on the marble floor as she tried to physically block my path. Step aside, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't break stride. I'm calling security. She shrieked, reaching for the phone on the wall. Don't bother, Mr. Graves said, adjusting his tie. We own the security company, too. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes focused on the double mahogany doors at the end of the corridor. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face was a mask of cold porcelain. I could hear shouting coming from inside the boardroom. I pushed the doors open with both hands. They swung wide with a heavy thud. The room smelled of stale coffee and fear. The 12 members of the board were slumped in their chairs, looking at the floor. At the far end of the long table, Julian was standing, his face purple with rage. He was screaming at his father. It's a raid, it's illegal. Julian shouted, slamming his fist onto the table. We file an injunction, we freeze the assets. There are no assets to freeze, you idiot. Mr. Thorne yelled back, looking older and frazzled. The stock is worthless. We have no leverage. I am the CEO, Julian roared. I decide when we sell. Can we please wrap this up? A bored voice cut in. Chloe was sitting to Julian's right, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. I have a dress fitting in an hour. This is so dramatic. Shut up, Chloe, Julian snapped. Excuse me, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a knife. The room went dead silent. Every head turned toward the door. Julian squinted at me. The harsh fluorescent lights were behind me, casting my face in shadow. He didn't recognize me. He just saw a woman in a sharp black suit, flanked by 2 imposing men. Who the hell are you? Julian demanded, straightening his tie. This is a private meeting. Get out? I didn't answer. I walked into the room, the sound of my heels echoing in the silence. Click, click, click. I walked past the terrified board members. I walked past Mr. Thorne, who looked at me with confusion. I walked all the way to the opposite end of the table, directly facing Julian. I pulled out the empty leather chair and sat down. Are you deaf? Julian laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. Security, get this woman out of here. Sit down, Julian, Mr. Graves said, placing his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. You don't tell me what to do, Julian spat. I don't know who you think you are, but you're trespassing. You're probably lawyers for that vulture, Evans. Tell him I'm not selling. You already sold, Marcus said, standing behind my chair like a sentinel. I didn't sign anything. Julian screamed, veins bulging in his neck. I own 40% of this company. And my client owns 51%, Mr. Graves said calmly. Julian froze. He looked from Graves to Marcus, and then finally he looked at me. He looked at my hands, resting calmly on the table. He looked at the diamond ring on my right hand, one I bought for myself. Your client? Julian whispered. Where is he? Is he too coward to face me? She, Graves corrected. Julian blinked. What? The majority shareholder is here, Graves said, gesturing to me. Mr. Thorne, meet the new owner of your company. I leaned forward into the light. I took off my sunglasses and set them on the table. Hello, Julian. Julian's face went white, all the blood drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white, as if the floor was tilting beneath him. Elena? He choked out. Is this a joke? Chloe asked, finally looking up from her phone. She squinted at me. Wait, is that the waitress? She's not a waitress, Mr. Thorne whispered, staring at me with a dawning realization of horror. She's the executioner. You, Julian stammered, shaking his head. You don't have this kind of money. You have nothing. I had nothing, I corrected him, my voice steady and cold. Now I have everything, including your chair. This is impossible, Julian muttered, sinking back into his seat as if his legs had given out. You're lying. Read the bylaws, Julian, I said, sliding the folder across the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of him. Chapter 1. Termination of executive leadership for gross incompetence. You can't fire me, he whispered, his eyes wide with panic. I built this. No, I said softly, you inherited it and then you broke it. I'm just here to sweep up the pieces. Elena? Julian whispered again, his voice cracking. He leaned over the table, squinting as if trying to merge the image of the woman in the Italian suit with the memory of the girl in the apron. But you're broke. Is she serious? Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Julian, isn't this the charity case? The one you said smelled like soup in desperation? I didn't even blink in her direction. She was noise. I was the signal. I turned my gaze to the 12 men sitting along the sides of the table. They were sweating. They knew who Evance was. They knew the shark had entered the tank. Gentlemen, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. If you turn to page 4 of the dossier, you will see the restructuring plan effective immediately. Restructuring? Mr. Thorne asked, his voice trembling. What does that mean? It means we are trimming the fat, I replied, flipping the page of my own folder. Thorne Industries has been bleeding capital on vanity projects and failed legacy software. That ends today. You can't just walk in here and dictate terms, Julian shouted. He stood up, knocking his chair back against the wall. I am the chairman. I run this meeting. Not anymore, Mr. Graves interjected smoothly. As majority shareholder, my client has invoked Article 7. The board is dissolved pending a new election. Dissolved? A board member gasped. But my pension, your pensions are safe. I cut him off. If you cooperate. If you resist, I'll audit every expense report you filed in the last decade. Silence fell over the room. Total submission. Now, I continued, regarding the executive leadership. The positions of CEO and CFO are hereby terminated for cause. Gross negligence and fiduciary irresponsibility. Terminated? Chloe shrieked. But we're buying a house in the Hamptons next month. We need the bonus. Cancel the escrow, Chloe, I said, finally looking at her. There is no bonus. There is no salary. There is only a cardboard box waiting in the lobby. You can't do this. Julian roared. He slammed his hands on the table, leaning toward me. His face was twisted in a mix of rage and terror. I am Thorne Industries. My name is on the building. It's just a sign, Julian. We can take it down, I said calmly. I built this. He screamed, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. I stayed up nights coding the original kernel. I pitched to investors. I made the sacrifices. You were just there. You were just the background noise. I stood up slowly. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The quiet authority radiating from me made Julian take a step back. No, Julian, I said, my voice low and lethal. You didn't build this alone. You coded because I worked double shifts to pay for the electricity. You pitched to investors because I ironed your suits and prepped your notes. You ate because I cooked. You slept because I cleaned. That's not business, he stammered. That was the foundation, I said, staring him dead in the eye. I supported you while you built this. I held you up when you were weak. And then, the moment you got a check, you threw me away like garbage. I leaned across the table, invading his space. You wanted a merger, Julian, you got one. I didn't just survive your betrayal, I monetized it. I bought your debt, I bought your shares, and now I bought you. Julian slumped. His shoulders collapsed. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time he didn't see the girl he left behind. He saw the monster he had created. Please, he whispered, his arrogance evaporating into mist. Get out of my chair, I said. I sat in the massive leather chair, spinning it slowly to face the door. The office was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. It still smelled like hemp cedarwood and expensive anxiety. I placed my hands flat on the mahogany desk, claiming the space. The door flew open with a violent bang. Elena, you have to listen to me. Julian stumbled into the room. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was wild. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man watching his life burn down. You are authorized to be in here, Julian, I said, not moving a muscle. I believe I fired you 10 minutes ago. He rushed toward the desk, ignoring my words. You can't do this. You can't just steal my life. I bought it, I corrected him calmly. At market value, technically I overpaid. It was a mistake. He shouted, his voice cracking. He reached the edge of the desk and gripped it with white-knuckled hands. Everything. The last 2 years it was all a mistake. I was pressured. My father, the investors, they forced me into the merger with Chloe's family. I never wanted her. I raised an eyebrow. You seemed to want her when you were posing for the magazine covers. You seemed to want her when you threw me out into the rain. I was scared. He came around the side of the desk, invading my personal space. I was weak, Elena, I admit it. I thought I needed the money to survive. But I was miserable, ask anyone. I was miserable every single day without you. You looked quite comfortable in the photos, I said, reaching for a pen. Please step back. He didn't step back. He collapsed. Julian Thorne, the man who had once looked at me with a sneer of superiority, fell to his knees on the plush carpet. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, ruining his complexion. Please, he begged, reaching out to grab my hand. His palm was sweaty. Elena, baby, look at me, it's Julian. It's your Julian. I looked at him. I waited for the spark. I waited for the old love to flare up or for the burning hatred to consume me. I don't see my Julian, I said, pulling my hand away. I see a trespasser. I can help you, he cried, scrambling forward on his knees. You need a CEO. You need a face for the company. I know the operations. I know the clients. Keep me on. We can run it together, like partners. Like we always talked about. We never talked about that, I replied coldly. You talked. I listened. I'll annul the marriage, he babbled, the desperation making him speak faster. I'll dump Chloe today. She means nothing to me. She's vapid, she's cruel, she's not you. It's always been you, Elena. I still love you. I never stopped. He tried to grab my hand again, burying his face against the arm of the chair. Give me another chance. We can be a power couple. We can rule this city. Just don't kick me out. Don't take away who I am. I stared down at the top of his head. I remembered how I used to brush his hair when he was tired. I remembered how I used to pray for his success. Now, looking at this sobbing, broken man begging for scraps of power, I felt hollow. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. There was just a vast, quiet indifference. He wasn't a monster. He was just a pathetic, small man who loved money more than people. Get up, Julian, I said softly. You'll do it? He asked, lifting his head, hope lighting up his wet eyes. You'll take me back? I stood up, towering over him. I smoothed my skirt. No, I said, my voice void of any emotion. I won't. But you said you supported me. You said you loved me. I did, I agreed, walking past him toward the door. But I've upgraded my standards. Elena. He screamed, reaching for my ankle. I stepped out of his reach. I looked back at him one last time. He looked like a child who had dropped his ice cream. I don't hate you, Julian, I told him, placing my hand on the doorknob. I just don't want you. And for the first time in my life, I don't need you. I opened the door. Security, I called out into the hall. The trash needs to be taken out. Security. I pressed the button on my desk. Almost instantly, 2 large men in dark suits marched into the room. They didn't look like they were in the mood for conversation. Remove Mr. Thorne from the building, I said, my voice flat. And confiscate his badge. Julian scrambled to his feet, wiping tears from his face with the back of his hand. He looked frantic, his eyes darting between me and the approaching guards. Elena, wait, please. He took a step toward me, hands outstretched. Remember the blue moon promise? We swore we'd always have each other's backs during a blue moon. You can't just erase that history. It was a stupid drunken joke from 5 years ago. Hearing it now just made me feel nauseous. That promise expired the night you left me in the rain, I said coldly. I spun my leather chair around, turning my back to him. I faced the floor-to-ceiling window. The city was gray and rainy, just like that night, but I was dry. I was warm. Don't touch me. Julian screamed as the guards grabbed him. I am the CEO. I built this place. Get your hands off me. Let's go, sir, a guard grunted. Don't make this ugly. Elena, look at me. Julian's voice was desperate, fading as they dragged him toward the door. We belong together. Don't do this. I didn't turn around. I listened to the scuffle of shoes on the carpet, then the heavy thud of the office door opening. The real drama happened in the hallway. I could hear every word echoing through the open door. Julian? Chloe's shrill voice cut through the air. Why are they holding you? Tell them to stop this instant. Chloe, baby, listen, Julian panted, the panic in his voice rising. There's been a hostile takeover. We need to go. Go? She shrieked. But the driver is waiting. We have reservations at Le Monde. We can't afford Le Monde, Julian sobbed. I'm fired, Chloe. It's gone. The accounts, the shares, the salary. It's all gone. Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then the explosion. Fired? Her voice went up an octave. You mean you're broke? It's temporary. I can fix it. I just need you to support me. Support you? She laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. I am not marrying a failure, Julian. The wedding is off. I'm taking the car. You can walk. Chloe, no, don't leave me. Get off me, you're pathetic. The sound of her heels clicking away was fast and angry. Julian's wailing echoed in the lobby until the elevator doors finally chimed and closed, cutting off the noise. Silence returned to the executive floor. It was beautiful. I swiveled my chair back to the desk. The termination papers sat there, waiting. Julian Thorne, terminated for cause. Chloe Thorne, terminated for redundancy. I uncapped my fountain pen. The black ink flowed smoothly as I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Elena Vance, CEO. I put the pen down and took a deep, shaking breath. I expected to feel guilty. I expected to feel sad for the boy I once loved, but I didn't. I felt lighter. The crushing weight that had sat on my chest for 2 years simply evaporated. The ghost was gone. It's over, I whispered to the empty room. I wasn't holding a grudge anymore. I wasn't holding on to the past. I was just free. I think this bottle of wine costs more than my first car, Sarah whispered, leaning over the pristine white tablecloth. I smiled, swirling the dark red liquid in the crystal glass. It probably does. Try the truffle risotto. It's worth every penny. Sarah looked around the dining room with wide eyes. It was the penthouse of the city's tallest hotel, the Skyline. The velvet chairs, the gold accents, the view of the entire metropolis. This was the place Julian had pinned on his vision board for years. He promised he would take me here for our 5th anniversary. He never did. It's strange, Sarah said, buttering a warm roll. Sitting here. Knowing that 6 months ago we were eating instant noodles on my floor. A lot changes in 6 months, I replied, taking a sip of the wine. Phoenix Corp is up 40% this quarter. We just opened the London office this morning. You did that, Sarah said, pointing her fork at me. You turned that sinking ship around. Even the news stopped calling it the Thorne scandal. It's just Phoenix now. Thorne is a dead name, I said calmly. We buried it under success. A shadow fell over the table. I looked up to see Marcus standing there. He wasn't wearing his usual intimidating boardroom scowl. He looked relaxed, his tie loosened slightly. Am I interrupting the victory lap? He asked, his voice low and warm. Never, I said, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. Sarah was just calculating how many months of rent this dinner could cover. Marcus sat down, signaling the waiter with a subtle nod. Champagne. The vintage. We have a celebration. What are we celebrating? Sarah asked, her eyes lighting up. Did we acquire the robotics firm? Marcus looked at me. His gaze held in new weight, respect, partnership, and something softer that made my pulse quicken. No, we are celebrating freedom. The waiter poured the golden liquid. The bubbles danced in the flutes. We raised our glasses. To Phoenix Corp, Sarah cheered. To the architect, Marcus added, clinking his glass against mine, his fingers brushing my hand. To the future, I finished. I took a sip. It was crisp and cold. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window. Down below, the city was a grid of glowing lights. It was raining. I could see the tiny blurred figures of people rushing for cover on the sidewalks. Somewhere down there in my memory, a girl was crying in the rain, holding a bag of broken noodles, feeling like her life was over. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing her. You did good, I told her silently. You survived. You can rest now. I opened my eyes. The reflection in the glass wasn't the girl in the rain anymore. It was the woman who owned the sky. Elena? Marcus touched my hand gently. You okay? I turned back to them, my smile genuine and bright. I'm perfect, I said, picking up the menu. Let's order dessert. I wasn't a victim of my past anymore. I was the architect of my future.